All right. This should be the last post for this. I'm going to go really quick through the two major uh, argued actual historians touted by Christians to claim that Jesus was a real person. Um, Now, separate from being, supernatural, you know, Jewish cosmic zombie who was his own father, um, if he was a real human being, actually born and actually preached at some point in time, and then people later embellished his miracles, um, historians should have probably taken note, considering he's apparently started quite a little uprising. And that's something people usually take note of. So I guess let's start with Josephus. Josephus is the one that's always touted by Christians. I mean, really, like they're really gung ho about Josephus. It's mostly because Josephus's works were really only maintained by Christians later on. Josephus was, to give you backstory, he was Hebrew Jew, and he was a Roman citizen. Very surprising. There were very few Jews in Palestine who were also Roman citizens. That says something of his social standing. He was a Pharisee, learned man, possibly the Sanhedrin. It doesn't really say, but he definitely held some sway, and he was a great historian. Some of his favorite stuff to write about was really how Herod the Great was so awful to the Jews. He wrote about it at length, and I'll cover actually that in another issue, because that really, his testimony of Herod and how much he despised Herod really butts heads with some things in Matthew. So, anyway, he wrote a book called The Antiquities of the Jews, and this is where the Christians really grab on. There's this one paragraph in there, and it says this: "About this time there lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man. For he was one who wrought surprising feats, and was a teacher of such people as accept the truth gladly. He won over many Jews, and many of the Greeks. He was the Messiah, when Pilate, upon hearing him accused by men of the highest standing amongst us, had condemned him to be crucified. Those who had in the first place come to love him did not give up their affection for him. On the third day he appeared to them restored to life, for the prophets of God had prophesied these and countless other marvelous things about him. And the tribe of Christians, so called after him, has still to this day not disappeared." Now, this is big, because Josephus calls him the Messiah by name. The Jews are still waiting for the Messiah. He was a Jew, and therefore he would not admit to Jesus being the Messiah. It's absurd. No Pharisee would ever admit to him being the Messiah. Now, also the fact that he admits that Jesus was resurrected and performed miracles and was the Messiah and wasn't a Christian is even worse. That's honestly, if I legitimately was like, oh yeah, no, dude, I saw him. He was hanging out. Like, if I met God and he was like, dude, I'm real, I'd be like, oh, all right. And that's kind of how those things work. So, not a Christian, probably didn't write this. And you can tell he didn't write it because there's a real break in the literary seam here. You can tell it's definitely someone put it in there, because the paragraph before and the paragraph after, all you have to do is take this paragraph out and it flows perfectly. Put it in, and it's kind of disjointed. That's how you can tell it's a forgery, because the paragraph immediately before says this: About the same time, also another sad calamity put the Jews into disorder. See, Josephus had previously been talking about the awful things that Pilate had done to the Jews in general, and this break in the literary seam really, you pick it up if you're paying attention to what you're reading. Now, couple this with the fact that Josephus was born in 37, the Common Era, about a half a decade after the crucifixion, if you accept the crucifixion happened in 32, like most people place it at, somewhere between 30 and 32. And I mean, just not credible. It's a forgery. The next historian, less touted than Josephus. I hear Josephus the most, but I hear Tacitus a lot. He was a Roman senator and a lifelong pagan. So, before considering the alleged witness of pagan authors, we should really note some things. Why did they leave certain things out? Pagan, and he's writing about Jesus. Jesus was a real person. You think he'd notice this, and in particular, I'm referring to Matthew 27:45 through 53. Now of the 6th hour, there was darkness over the land unto the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Some of them that stood there when they heard that said, This man calleth for Elias. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put a reed on it and gave him to drink. The rest said, Let be, let us see whether Elias will come to save him. Jesus, when he cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain, and from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, and the graves were opened, and the bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of their graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city, and appeared to many. Now, one thing, if you're into history, you know, especially ancient history, Romans, the Romans were very anal about records. They kept records on everything. Everything. They probably would have noticed a solar eclipse, especially at a time of the year where they're impossible to happen. You'll never see an eclipse on Easter Sunday or Good Friday because it just doesn't happen at that time of year. Solar eclipses happen at very specific periods of time, and something like this would be of note. Even the Romans knew this. Wouldn't someone have remembered in recorded at least one of those saints that climbed out of his grave and started wandering around town? You'd think you'd notice a couple of rotting corpses up. People like, hey, John, I thought you were dead, but apparently you're not. You're wandering around talking to people. They didn't. And more so, Tacitus was born in 55, the Common Era, a quarter century after the crucifixion. He wasn't an historical witness to Jesus. The single allusion to Jesus being crucified under Pilate, who, by the way, he names procurator, which was not his title and wasn't a title used until the 2nd century. Pilate's correct title was prefect. It came to him secondhand at best. There was no credible evidence for the existence of Jesus in any historical sense. The only things that mention him, you have a couple, forged histories. You have some, 3rd, 4th, or 5th hand documents in the Gospels, and you have a couple letters. Most of them probably arguably forgeries, written by a man who's either a liar or a schizophrenic, who admittedly never met Jesus. So none of this would stand up in the court of law. I couldn't offer anything like this in a murder trial. And really considering the similarities between Jesus and other Mediterranean gods, Mithra, Horus, Krishna, just floating around all the time, and I'll cover them in later videos, believe me. It's not a real person. Sorry, guys. Until next time, see you later.